We've seen a lot of leadership change on college campuses around our region this year, from Dartmouth to Champlain to St. Michael's and now Vermont State University. Our Jack Thurston spoke with President David Berg, who oversees all of its campuses and 5,200 students.
I guess for starters, many Vermonters don't yet know your story. Introduce yourself.
Well, thank you. I'm a longtime Vermonter who's coming back to Vermont and could not be more excited to be back in Vermont. And I think sometimes you have that new appreciation when you're coming back and seeing things, a place through new eyes. And so in the last couple of weeks, as I've been traveling around the state to our various campuses, it's just reinforced for me what a wonderful place Vermont is, its people and culture, and obviously the natural beauty. So I grew up in upstate New York, had spent nearly 20 years in Vermont, and so this is a homecoming of sorts for me.
Well, you're the new leader, but in many ways the university itself is new. I mean, in terms of being merged with these various campuses. Why is this an exciting job for you to be taking on?
I'm just excited because I know from my prior time in Vermont how important these then campuses, now university, are to the state in terms of providing access and opportunity to Vermonters, but also being real anchors and resources to the communities and regions that they're in. And I think they're really poised for a lot of exciting developments in the future. I think really taking a hard look at the range of programs we're offering to students to find that we're having the most relevant and exciting programs for them, and really looking at the opportunity to use these campuses as bases to do exciting things in the state. I mean, I just think it's a great time to be affiliated with the university.
A lot of the headlines around the university recently have been about the challenges it's facing, the financial challenges, proposed cuts, enrollment declines. About that third challenge, enrollment declines,
right.
How do you hope to turn that around? How do you hope to boost enrollment?
Right, well, I have great confidence in our enrollment team in the short time that I've gotten to know them and are working with them. I think they're really engaged with some great strategic planning to really look at recruitment strategies, but I think the most important thing is making sure we have a mix of programs that are relevant and exciting for Vermonters and for students coming from out of state that see these programs as launching pads to careers that they're excited about. And I think that that's part of the work we're doing as part of this optimization process, really making sure we've got that right range of programs so that students do see VTSU as a place they want to be. So I'm really looking forward to that work and confident that we're developing a range of programs that are going to be pertinent to students.
Previous leaders had proposed various cuts, whether it was to a library, whether it was to athletics or whatnot. Are some of those challenges in the rear view? Do you anticipate having to tighten the belt when you fully are living in Randolph?
We just went through a pretty significant right-sizing exercise, right? And so I think, and that's difficult, that's always painful. These are colleagues and friends who have a lot of history with the university. But I think there's a real optimism moving forward because I think we are at a point right now where we do feel we can kind of take a pause and reorient, refocus on serving our students, supporting each other moving forward. So I'm not anticipating, there's been so much change at such a fast pace. And again, as you said, we forget that we're still in the first year of this university, right? So I think moving forward, what I see right now is a period of kind of reorientation, focusing on the future, building on the momentum we have. And so no, I don't anticipate as part of that they'll have the level of disruption that's been experienced in recent months.
As you have toured the campuses, Linden, Randolph, Castleton, Williston, what are you hearing from your colleagues at each of those campuses? Because each one is a bit different.
Each one is a bit different, and that's one of the things I really appreciate about the university, and I think the way we're moving forward is to help all of these campuses find a way to maintain their core identity, but also clearly feel part of a larger university and have the benefits of both of those things, right? Campuses with distinct cultures, but all the benefits and services that go along with a larger university. So, obviously the particular priorities and concerns and issues are slightly different by the campus, but overall the message I'm hearing is one of people really excited to move forward to support students and engage in their work in support of students and the state. So, the energy this week was really palpable when I was As I say, I was hitting all of our campuses this week. I've got a great event in Williston later this week. A different feel on every campus, but that's the shared sense of commitment to students. That's the overriding shared energy.
Of course, you're most familiar with the campus in Johnson.
Yes, yes. Yeah, Johnson really is where my heart is, and now my heart is with all of VTSU, of course. Even when I was at Johnson the last probably half dozen years I was there, I was doing a lot of work on initiatives at the then system level when these campuses were separate colleges. So I spent a lot of time on each of the campuses. So I've been to each of the campuses previously. I was familiar with them, had colleagues on all of those campuses and a real appreciation for each of them. But you're right, at the end of the day, Johnson is where I spent nearly 20 years prior in my first iteration in Vermont, and that's a really special place to me.
We keep hearing about the job fields that are in most demand right now in our society. And it seems to me that VTSU, especially the campuses in Randolph and Williston, are very well positioned to meet the needs of those high demand fields. I'm talking about nursing,
yes,
the trades, construction site management, engineering, those kind of things. Do you see that as an area where the university can really excel and take off in the years to come?
Absolutely, and as I say, I think our focus is on programs that are both of interest and of need to students and will be serving the workforce needs for Vermont. So you named a few of them. The nursing expansion is a major priority for us. That's a clear need in the state. Some of the trades, I mean, our apprenticeship programs in plumbing and electrical, those are really rapidly growing. But at the same time, we have a lot of programs in the more traditional liberal arts base that are also meeting some critical needs for Vermonters, especially in education areas, early childhood education. I think of clinical mental health counseling as a program that really we can't turn out folks from those programs fast enough in terms of employee needs in the state.
We've been talking a lot about brick and mortar campus buildings. What is your vision for online education? Is that an area that you would like to see VTSU build upon?
I think as we move forward to truly become a hybrid model that really can be ground setting, I think that having robust online opportunities needs to be part of that. We need to meet students where they are, whether that's an on-campus experience or otherwise, and I think moving forward we're going to make sure that both of those elements are strong.
Tell me about cost barriers, because while the university for Vermonters is, I would say, a pretty good value,
yes,
you have to keep it a good value.
Yes.
What would you tell a parent, especially as they maybe are helping their child navigate the college search experience, about what they can expect for the cost of a degree from the university?
Well, I think that there's a real bang for your buck with our programs at VTSU, and cost has long been a real concern and focus of the board and of the leadership, of keeping it reasonable, keeping it within range. Having around a $10,000 cost for in-state students is very reasonable, particularly in association with the job placement that we know these students are going to have when they come out. I mean, I think that more than ever, despite some of the popular narrative that you see in media, a degree is more important than ever in terms of a predictor of future opportunities and options. There's always risk in kind of pursuing too specific a program early on, because I think that the broad-based liberal arts education and some associated specific trade areas are the best preparation for life in a world in which people have multiple careers and might not be doing the same thing in 20 years. So I think in terms of cost, it's a real focus for us, keeping it affordable, working with students directly on an individual basis to make sure that we can have a package for them that makes them able to attend VTSU.
Your predecessor, Mike Smith, an interim leader, he used to say that VTSU is Vermont's university for Vermonters. That was a line that he often used. Do you share that view in terms of you want more Vermont students to see this as an asset for them?
Yeah, and I think they do. I really do think they do. I mean, I knew this back from my Johnson days, that the schools in the then Vermont State College system and now Vermont State University are overwhelmingly this is where Vermonters go for higher education. This is where they go to access that opportunity. And we want to continue to have that as our core. Obviously, we have a number of programs that especially that attract students from out of state, and that's going to be an important part of our mix, back to your question about admission strategies earlier. But at the core of what we do, we are the college for Vermonters, and that's always going to be essential to our identity.
And you want to keep it that way.
Yes, absolutely. We want to keep it that way.
All right, Dr. David Berg, thanks so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Look forward to talking to you again.
Absolutely. Thank you.